The Caribbean sun blazed mercilessly over the turquoise waters as Captain Blackwood's ship, the Serpent's Revenge, cut through the waves with predatory grace. It was the year 1715, and these waters belonged to those bold enough to claim them. The morning had brought unexpected fortune when they spotted the Spanish merchant vessel Santa Isabella sailing alone, heavy with cargo bound for Havana. Captain Marcus Blackwood stood at the helm, his weathered hands gripping the wheel as his crew prepared for battle. At 32, he had earned his reputation through cunning rather than cruelty, though few dared test his resolve. His dark hair whipped in the salt breeze as he studied the approaching vessel through his spyglass. "Ready the cannons, but aim for the rigging," he commanded his first mate, a grizzled Scotsman named Macready. "I want her disabled, not destroyed. Spanish merchants always carry the finest treasures." The attack was swift and precise. Within an hour, the Santa Isabella surrendered. Her crew huddled on deck as Blackwood's men boarded. The captain himself swung across on a rope, landing gracefully on the foreign deck with practiced ease. "Where is your manifest?" Blackwood demanded of the Spanish captain, who trembled as he handed over the ship's papers. As Marcus scanned the documents, his eyes widened. Among the listed passengers was Señorita Isabella Mendoza, daughter of Don Carlos Mendoza, Governor of Puerto Rico. "Bring me this woman," he ordered, though something in his tone suggested curiosity rather than malice. When Isabella was brought before him, Blackwood found himself momentarily speechless. She stood with dignity despite her circumstances, her dark eyes flashing with defiance. Her elaborate dress of deep blue silk, adorned with intricate lace, marked her clearly as nobility. Yet it was not her finery that caught his attention, but the fierce intelligence in her gaze. "So you are the governor's daughter," he said, circling her slowly. "Tell me, señorita, what brings such precious cargo to these dangerous waters?" Isabella lifted her chin proudly. "I am traveling to Cartagena to marry Don Fernando Vasquez, as arranged by my father." "You have no right to detain me, pirate." The word pirate rolled off her tongue like a curse, but Blackwood merely smiled. "Rights are earned in these waters, not granted. You are now my prisoner, and your father will pay handsomely for your return." As his men began transferring the most valuable cargo to their ship, Blackwood couldn't shake the image of Isabella's defiant stare. There was something about her that intrigued him, beyond her obvious value as a hostage. Perhaps it was the way she refused to cower, or how she spoke to him as an equal despite their circumstances. "Take the lady to my cabin," he instructed Macready. "See that she is treated with respect. She is our guest, not our enemy." Isabella was escorted to the captain's quarters, a surprisingly well-appointed room with carved furniture and maps covering every wall. Books lined the shelves, revealing an educated mind behind the pirate's reputation. She examined her surroundings carefully, noting the quality of the furnishings and the absence of the crude decorations she might have expected. Meanwhile, Blackwood concluded his business with the Spanish vessel. He took only what was most valuable, leaving the crew with enough supplies to reach the nearest port safely. This was his way, efficient, but not unnecessarily cruel. As evening approached, he entered his cabin to find Isabella standing by the windows, watching the sunset paint the Caribbean sky in brilliant oranges and reds. She had removed her elaborate headdress, allowing her long dark hair to fall freely about her shoulders. "The view is beautiful from here," she said, without turning around. "I can almost forget that I am a prisoner." "You are my guest," Blackwood corrected, moving to stand beside her. "There is a difference." "A guest who cannot leave," Isabella replied, finally meeting his gaze. "That sounds very much like a prisoner to me, Captain." For the first time in years, Marcus Blackwood found himself at a loss for words. This woman was unlike any he had encountered in his years sailing these waters. She possessed a strength that matched his own, wrapped in grace and intelligence that commanded respect. The first chapter of their unlikely encounter had begun, setting the stage for a tale that would challenge everything both believed about duty, freedom, and the unexpected power of the human heart. 3 days had passed since Isabella Mendoza became an unwilling passenger aboard the Serpent's Revenge. The ship sailed steadily through the Caribbean waters, heading toward Tortuga, where Captain Blackwood intended to send word to her father regarding ransom arrangements. However, the dynamics aboard the vessel had begun to shift in ways the seasoned pirate captain had not anticipated. Isabella had proven to be far from the helpless noblewoman he had expected. She moved about the ship with growing confidence, engaging the crew in conversations that revealed her sharp intellect and genuine curiosity about their lives. Many of the men, initially wary of their highborn captive, found themselves charmed by her questions about navigation, weather patterns, and life at sea. "She's not what you'd expect from a governor's daughter," Macready commented to Blackwood as they watched Isabella examining the ship's compass with obvious fascination. "Most noble ladies would be weeping in their chambers by now." Blackwood nodded, his eyes never leaving Isabella's figure as she listened intently to the navigator's explanations. "Indeed, she seems more interested in understanding our world than condemning it." That evening, as was becoming their custom, Isabella joined Blackwood for dinner in his cabin. The meals had evolved from tense, formal affairs to surprisingly engaging conversations. Tonight, she wore a simpler dress she had fashioned from spare fabric, having declared her elaborate gowns impractical for shipboard life. "Tell me, Captain," she began, cutting into the roasted fish that served as their main course, "how does a man become a pirate? Surely you were not born to this life." Blackwood paused, his fork halfway to his mouth. Few had ever asked him such a direct question about his past. "What makes you think I was not born to it?" "Your books." Isabella gestured toward the shelves lining the cabin walls. "Aristotle, Cervantes, even some works on mathematics and astronomy. These are not the possessions of a common criminal. You speak like an educated man, yet you live outside the law. I find myself curious about the contradiction." The captain set down his utensils and leaned back in his chair. Something in Isabella's tone suggested genuine interest rather than mere curiosity. "I was born in Cornwall, the second son of a merchant family. My father sent me to Oxford, hoping I would enter the clergy or perhaps serve in the colonial administration." "But you chose the sea instead," Isabella observed. "The sea chose me," Blackwood corrected. "After university, I served as an officer in His Majesty's Navy. I believed in duty, honor, and the righteousness of the Crown's cause, until I witnessed what those noble ideals looked like when applied to the native peoples of these islands." Isabella's expression grew serious. "You speak as if you experienced a great disillusionment." "I watched good men follow orders to destroy entire villages, to enslave families who had done nothing but exist in the path of English expansion. When I questioned these actions, I was told that savages had no rights that civilized men were bound to respect." Blackwood's voice grew bitter. "I realized then that the law serves only those with power to enforce it. So you abandoned law altogether." "I chose to live by my own code instead," Blackwood replied. "I take from those who have gained their wealth through exploitation, and I harm no one who does not threaten me first. It may not be lawful, but it allows me to sleep at night." Isabella studied his face in the flickering candlelight. "And yet you treat your prisoner with kindness and respect. You could have demanded far worse from me, but you have been nothing but honorable." The admission hung in the air between them, creating an intimacy that neither had expected. Blackwood found himself drawn to this woman who seemed to see beyond his reputation to the man beneath. "You are not what I expected either, Señorita Mendoza," he said softly. "Most would condemn me without seeking to understand my choices." "Perhaps we are both more complex than our circumstances suggest," Isabella replied, her dark eyes meeting his across the small table. As the evening wore on, they spoke of books, philosophy, and their different views of the world. Isabella revealed her frustration with the limited life prescribed for women of her station, while Blackwood shared his dreams of finding a place where he could live freely without constantly looking over his shoulder. When Isabella finally retired to her small adjoining chamber, Blackwood remained at his table, staring out at the moonlit sea. For the first time in years, he found himself questioning not just the world around him, but his own carefully constructed life. This Spanish noblewoman was awakening something in him that he had thought long buried beneath years of hardship and cynicism. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight, Marcus Blackwood allowed himself to wonder what it might be like to have someone who truly understood him by his side. The morning of the fifth day brought troubling news that would change everything aboard the Serpent's Revenge. A merchant vessel flying Portuguese colours had been spotted on the horizon, and after intercepting it for news, Captain Blackwood learned information that sent a chill through his experienced heart. "Captain," Macready reported grimly after returning from the brief encounter with the Portuguese ship. "They carry word from Cartagena. Don Fernando Vasquez grows impatient waiting for his bride. He has dispatched 3 warships to search these waters, and he has offered a substantial reward for any information leading to the lady's recovery. Blackwood's jaw tightened as he processed this intelligence. How substantial? 5,000 pieces of 8, Captain. An immunity from prosecution for any man who delivers her safely to Cartagena. Macready's expression was troubled. The crew is talking. Some of the men are suggesting we might profit more by delivering the lady directly to her intended husband rather than waiting for ransom from her father. The captain's hand instinctively moved to his sword hilt. Any man who suggests betraying our guest will answer to me personally. We are pirates, not slavers who trade in unwilling women. However, the conversation had planted a seed of urgency in Blackwood's mind. He realized that Isabella might face more immediate danger than he had initially calculated. That evening, he found her on deck, watching the sunset as had become her custom. The warm Caribbean breeze lifted her dark hair, and she seemed lost in contemplation. "Señorita Isabella," he began carefully, "I must ask you something of a personal nature. This marriage you travel toward, is it truly your desire?" Isabella's expression darkened, and she gripped the ship's rail more tightly. "My desires have little bearing on the matter, Captain. It is an arrangement between my father and Don Fernando, designed to strengthen political alliances between Puerto Rico and the mainland colonies. But surely your happiness must factor into such a decision." Isabella laughed, but there was no joy in the sound. "I have never even met Don Fernando. I know only what my father has told me, that he is wealthy, influential, and in need of a wife to manage his household and bear his children. My education, my thoughts, my preferences, these are considered irrelevant to the arrangement." Blackwood felt something cold settle in his stomach. "And if you could choose freely?" "I would choose to travel, to learn, to see the world beyond the confines of a colonial mansion," Isabella replied passionately. "I would choose to use my education for something meaningful, rather than merely supervising servants and hosting dinner parties for my husband's business associates." As she spoke, her eyes blazed with the same fire that had first caught Blackwood's attention. Here was a woman with the spirit of an explorer, trapped in the expectations of her social class. The injustice of it stirred something protective and fierce within him. "What if I told you that you need not go to Cartagena?" he asked quietly. Isabella turned to face him fully, surprise evident in her features. "What do you mean?" "I mean that you are under my protection now. I could arrange passage for you to any port in the Caribbean, Jamaica, Barbados, even the American colonies. You could disappear, start a new life, where no one knows of your father's arrangements." "You would do that?" Isabella's voice was barely above a whisper. "Even though my father's ransom would surely be more valuable than whatever you might gain from helping me escape." Blackwood stepped closer, his voice dropping to match hers. "Some things are more valuable than gold, Isabella. Your freedom, your happiness, these are worth more than any ransom." The use of her given name created an intimacy that neither could ignore. Isabella searched his face, seeing something there that she had never encountered in any man before. Genuine concern for her welfare, without expectation of reward. "But the risks," she protested weakly. "If my father discovered your involvement, if Don Fernando learned that you helped me escape." "Let me worry about the risks," Blackwood replied firmly. "The question is what you want, not what others expect of you." Isabella fell silent, overwhelmed by the possibility he offered. For the first time in her life, someone was asking what she truly desired, rather than telling her what she ought to want. The realization was both liberating and terrifying. "I need time to think," she said finally. "Of course," Blackwood agreed. "But know this, whatever you decide, I will respect your choice. If you wish to continue to Cartagena and fulfill your father's arrangements, I will ensure you arrive safely. If you choose freedom, I will help you claim it." As Isabella retired to her cabin that night, her mind raced with possibilities she had never dared to imagine. Meanwhile, Blackwood stood watch on deck, knowing that whatever she decided would change the course of both their lives forever. Dawn broke with ominous clouds gathering on the horizon, both literally and figuratively. Captain Blackwood was awakened by urgent knocking on his cabin door. Macready's voice carried through the heavy wood with barely contained alarm. "Captain!" 3 ships bearing Spanish colors approaching from the northeast. "They fly the banner of Don Fernando Vasquez." Blackwood sprang from his bed, quickly donning his coat and boots. Isabella emerged from her adjoining chamber, already dressed and alert. "Is it him?" she asked, her face pale but her voice steady. It appears your intended husband has grown tired of waiting. Blackwood replied grimly as he strapped on his sword. Macready, how long before they reach us? 2 hours at most, Captain. They're fast ships, built for pursuit. Blackwood's mind raced through their options. The Serpent's Revenge was swift, but not swift enough to outrun 3 vessels in open water. Fighting was possible, but risky with Isabella aboard. Surrender would mean facing Spanish justice, which for a pirate meant certain death. There is another option, Isabella said quietly, reading the conflict in his expression. If I were to willingly board Don Fernando's ship, he would have no reason to pursue you further. Absolutely not, Blackwood replied firmly. I will not deliver you to a marriage you do not want. But if I do not go willingly, many of your men will die in the fighting that follows, Isabella pressed. I cannot have their blood on my conscience. As they debated, the Spanish ships drew closer. Through his spyglass, Blackwood could see the elaborate figurehead of the lead vessel and the gold-trimmed uniform of the man standing at its bow. Don Fernando Vasquez was indeed aboard, come to claim his bride personally. There might be a way, Blackwood said slowly, an idea forming in his mind, but it would require you to trust me completely. Before Isabella could respond, a voice boomed across the water through a speaking trumpet. Ahoy there, I am Don Fernando Vasquez, come to claim my lawfully betrothed bride. Surrender the lady peacefully and you shall be allowed to sail away unmolested. Blackwood stepped to the rail and raised his own speaking trumpet. I am Captain Marcus Blackwood. The lady is under my protection, and she remains here by her own choice. Her choice is irrelevant. Don Fernando's voice carried clearly across the water. She is bound by sacred contract to become my wife. I demand her immediate return. It was then that Isabella stepped forward, taking the speaking trumpet from Blackwood's hands. Don Fernando, she called out. I am Isabella Mendoza, and I have something to tell you. Speak quickly, woman. My patience grows thin. Isabella looked at Blackwood, her eyes conveying both trust and desperation. I cannot marry you, Don Fernando, for I am no longer pure. This pirate captain has claimed me as his lover. The declaration sent shockwaves through both ships. Don Fernando's face, visible even at distance, turned crimson with rage. You lie, he shouted. No daughter of Governor Mendoza would willingly consort with a pirate. It was then that Blackwood understood Isabella's plan. Without hesitation, he pulled her into his arms and kissed her passionately, ensuring that every man on all 4 ships could witness the embrace. The kiss, meant as performance, quickly became something far more real, as years of longing and desire crystallized in that single moment. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing heavily, their hearts racing from more than just the danger of their situation. The kiss had been intended to save them both, but it had awakened something neither had expected. There is your proof, Don Fernando, Blackwood called out, his arm still around Isabella's waist. The lady has chosen her course. Don Fernando's rage was terrible to behold. Then she has brought dishonor upon her family name. I want nothing more to do with such a woman. You may keep your tainted prize, pirate. The Spanish ships began to turn away, Don Fernando's pride wounded beyond repair. No Spanish nobleman would accept a bride who had been publicly claimed by another man, regardless of the circumstances. As the danger receded, Isabella and Blackwood remained at the rail, still holding each other. The kiss that had begun as desperate theatre had revealed feelings that neither could deny any longer. Isabella, Blackwood whispered, his voice rough with emotion. What we just did. I know, she replied softly, her hand resting over his heart. It was meant to save us both, but I fear it has done something far more dangerous. What is that? Isabella looked up into his eyes, seeing her own newfound feelings reflected there. It has made me realize that I am in love with you, Marcus Blackwood. Not with the pirate captain, but with the man who offered me freedom when no one else would. The admission hung between them like a bridge neither could cross back over. In trying to escape one fate, they had discovered something that would change both their lives forever. 3 months later, the Serpent's Revenge sailed into the protected harbour of Nassau in the Bahamas, a place where pirates could find temporary refuge and respite from the constant pursuit of naval forces. The ship had changed considerably during those months at sea, as had the relationship between its captain and the woman who had once been his prisoner. Isabella Mendoza had transformed from a reluctant captive into an integral part of the ship's community. She had proven herself invaluable as the ship's medic, using knowledge gleaned from her education to treat injuries and illnesses among the crew. Her quick thinking and steady hands had saved several lives during their encounters with other vessels, earning her the complete respect and loyalty of every man aboard. Captain Marcus Blackwood watched from the quarterdeck as Isabella supervised the unloading of their latest cargo. She had abandoned her elaborate Spanish gowns entirely, now dressing in practical clothing that allowed her to move freely about the ship. Her dark hair was often braided back in the manner of seasoned sailors, and her once pale skin had taken on a healthy bronze from months under the Caribbean sun. "She's taken to this life like she was born to it," Macready observed, joining his captain at the rail. "Never seen a lady adapt so quickly to the sea." "She was never meant for the confined life of a colonial mansion," Blackwood replied, though his eyes never left Isabella's figure. "She has the soul of an explorer, the heart of an adventurer." Their relationship had deepened slowly and naturally over the months following their dramatic escape from Don Fernando. The kiss that had begun as performance had blossomed into genuine love, built on mutual respect, shared conversations, and the daily intimacy of life aboard a ship. They had become true partners, both in their personal relationship and in the management of the vessel. "Captain," Isabella called up to him, "the harbour master wants to speak with you about provisions, and there's word that Governor Woods Rogers has been asking questions about our activities." Blackwood nodded and made his way down to meet with the harbour officials. Nassau existed in a delicate balance between pirate haven and legitimate colonial port. Governor Rogers, tasked with bringing order to the Bahamas, had been offering pardons to pirates willing to abandon their lawless ways. It was an opportunity that Blackwood had been considering more seriously since Isabella had become part of his life. That evening, as they dined alone in his cabin, Isabella broached the subject that had been weighing on both their minds. "Marcus," she began carefully, "what if we accepted the governor's pardon?" Blackwood set down his wine cup and studied her face. "You would be willing to give up this life? The freedom, the adventure?" "I would be willing to build a different kind of life," Isabella replied thoughtfully. "One where we don't have to constantly look over our shoulders, where we might have a future together without the shadow of the gallows hanging over us." "And what would we do? I am trained for little besides warfare and seamanship." Isabella reached across the table and took his hand. "We could establish a trading company. Your knowledge of these waters, combined with my family connections and education, could create something legitimate and prosperous. We could explore the world through commerce rather than piracy." The idea appealed to Blackwood more than he cared to admit. The years of constant danger, of living outside the law, had begun to weigh on him. The thought of building something lasting with Isabella, of perhaps even having children who would not grow up with the stigma of their father's criminal past, was deeply attractive. "There would be challenges," he said slowly. "Your father would never approve of our union. Don Fernando, despite his public rejection, still has influence that could make our lives difficult." "Then we start fresh," Isabella replied firmly. "New names, new identities. We have enough accumulated wealth to establish ourselves anywhere in the Americas or even return to Europe. What matters is that we face those challenges together." Over the following week, they made their preparations. The crew was informed of their captain's decision, and while some chose to continue their piratical careers under Macready's leadership, others decided to accept pardons and seek legitimate employment. On their final night aboard the Serpent's Revenge, Isabella and Marcus stood together on the deck where they had first kissed. The ship that had brought them together would soon belong to another, but the bond they had forged would endure. "Do you regret any of it?" Marcus asked, holding Isabella close as they watched the stars reflect on the calm harbour waters. "How could I regret the path that led me to you?" Isabella replied, turning in his arms to face him. "I was meant to be the unwilling bride of a man who saw me as property. Instead, I found a man who values my mind, respects my choices, and loves me for who I truly am." Their second kiss was nothing like their first. No longer desperate theatre, but a promise of the life they would build together. They had begun as captain and prisoner, but they would face the future as equal partners, bound by love and united in their determination to forge their own destiny. As dawn broke over Nassau Harbour, Marcus and Isabella Blackwood, for she had taken his name in a simple ceremony performed by the ship's quartermaster, walked hand in hand toward their new life, leaving behind the world of piracy for the greater adventure of building a future together. Their love story had begun with deception and desperation, but it would continue with hope, determination, and the unshakable belief that two people who truly understand each other can overcome any obstacle the world places in their path.